Hello. Welcome in, Twitch family. Thank you, Wings, Crime, Leo, for being here right at the start. I appreciate your support very much. I'm sure you'll be introduced to other people as we go along this evening. Yes, here we are doing a very professional event. So, for the purposes of this evening, some of you know me as Kimsey Sims on Twitch, but as most of you already know, I am also Casey Finn, author extraordinaire and co-founder and co-author for Odd Voice Out Publishing, and we're going to be bringing this very special event to you guys today. So we're going to be kicking off tonight, specifically with a little intro. We've got 8 wonderful authors coming in throughout the evening, who we're going to be interviewing live and talking about the 2 books which you see to the side of the screen here. That's Teens of Tomorrow and Odd Voices. Teens of Tomorrow has just come out on Monday. And if you want to get any information about how to obtain the copy of that, Crime will be happy to provide information for you in the chat. There is also a scrolling text going along, which should have some good information for you too. So, which is the superhero secret identity, Casey, Finn, or Kimsey? You will never know, Crime. It might not be either of those two. How about that? Okay, so I am going to bring my co-founder and co-author of Odd Voice Out Publishing in, and we're going to give you a little moment here where we're going to talk about the origins of how these anthologies came about and why we decided to publish them based on writing contests and that sort of thing. And then, not very long from now, we'll be kicking off with some of our authors for tonight. They're very nervous. Be nice. Give them lots of hype. And if you have any questions, by all means, I will be monitoring the chat. Kell is conducting some of the interviews and I'm conducting some of the others, but I will try and keep a lid on the chat so that we know fully what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to switch over onto the other screen now, and hopefully Kelly's going to join me. Indeed. Hello, Kelly. Let's get you unmuted. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Or at least can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes. And as we probably should say, I should have been there in person tonight. I was hoping to be over at your flat.
Yes, you should have been here on this screen with me. It might have been a tad bit easier for the evening's proceedings if you had been.
Yeah. But just to complement things, I've been hit with one of the old self-isolation orders this week. So I'm back to a life sort of pottering around my flat, wishing I could go outside and see people.
Yes, very much looking forward to seeing you outdoors again, as opposed to on a screen. It's not good fun times. Yes, but needs must, and we have the world of technology thanks to the pandemic, so it certainly made things easier in terms of already knowing the right programming to use to beam you in for the evening.
Yep, this is our life now.
This is our life now, yeah. Okay, so yeah, I thought we might get started a little bit. I mean, obviously, some of the regular watchers of my stream already know about Odd Voice Out, and they know that we are a very deliberately diverse and different teen press, trying to bring own voices and underrepresented stories and those kind of things. And of course, we publish your novels and mine very much under that banner. But I wondered if you might like to tell the viewers at home what brought us to the decision to open these writing contests to find other voices in the short story anthologies that we're talking about tonight.
Well, I think it all goes back to the origin of it was 3 years ago now at the 2018 Yalk Festival. Now, me and Kim had been friends for a few years before that. We met in 2015, and it was quite a serendipitous meeting.
Did we? Really,
gosh, yeah, that was how long ago it was. I checked before everyone.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was. We both moved to Chester within, I think, about the same month, hadn't we? So we were both in that position of being in a new city, looking to make new friends, and in that endeavour, we'd both gone along to an audition for Midsummer Night's Dream, and at that audition just sort of struck up a friendship very quickly, found out we both wrote YA fiction, You know, for the following years after that, we would just, you know, we had very similar tastes and interests, very, you know, we like the same kind of genres, the same kind of characters appealed to us. So we became like readers and sort of supporters of each other's writing, regularly test reading for each other and everything. And so you had gone to the 2017 YALC, I believe. And just to sort of clarify, those who don't know what YALC is an annual young adult fiction festival convention that is held in the Olympia in London. It's actually a sort of it's an extension of the Comic-Con they normally have there a year. I say normally because they didn't have it last year, and it's not looking like they're going to have it this year.
Yes, unfortunately, true. Yeah,
unfortunately. And so I was told this is an absolutely amazing, and it really is. It's a lovely festival where they have big stalls for representing different authors and publishing houses. They've got lots of just like fun things going on, like they've got workshops, they've got all sorts of interesting merch and competitions and things like that. And if you're a YA fiction fan, it is just like a mecca. So we went along to that together for the full weekend in 2018, and we were sort of, as much as we were just enjoying it as YA fiction fans, we were also sort of looking out at like particularly some of the indie fiction stalls, like some people were the ones who had their own label and they were representing themselves, and they were doing like running their own workshops and stuff like that. And we just got talking mainly on the train home about why don't we do this? And you know, we felt like between us we had all the skills to be able to put together our own sort of, you know, our own like brand and establish our own ethos, and, you know, produce our own books and covers and all that. We felt like we could actually create our own little shop here. And we also have like a great circle of writer friends in Chester. So we knew it was one of those things that there would be not only, you know, not only could we do it just the two of us, but we also had a wider network of support. So it then became a bit of a challenge that we set for ourselves, like, let's do this in 2019. So we basically set ourselves this big deadline of like, we've got to go from nothing to having a full like publishing house with several publications. And we also ran our first short story competition during that year.
That was an insane space of time to do all that. I don't know how we did it now, because it's been difficult enough to get teens on the shelves, and the paperback is still slightly delayed, but is coming within the next fortnight. So yeah, it's kind of amazing the amount of stuff that we managed to do in that first 18 months to launch everything.
This is the power of deadlines. We say we're going to do something, we put it out there, and it's like, right, we've got to do it now.
Yeah, commitment is key. Yeah, so I mean that brought us definitely into the world of young adult fiction with this very short, sharp shock, just launching everything and bringing the first couple of books out, and then having plans for the next line for us, but also creating odd voices in between. And we had a slew of entries to go through, which really, I don't know about you, but it really opened my eyes to the bevy of talent that was out there, and other authors at home and abroad that we could connect to as well.
I mean, absolutely, because we pitched it as a global competition, and I didn't think we realised how we were going to get such a wealth of global entries. And it was great to sort of have stories that were to our taste, but not only that, from all corners of the world, representing all different cultures. And the premise for the initial Odd Voices anthology was something that we both felt very passionately about, which was something that we, obviously the name Odd Voices, Odd Voice Out, suggests to you that we're looking for stories that don't have sort of cookie cutter narrators, and do feature more diverse and unusual voices, ones that you don't see, well, I wouldn't say either you don't see enough of, but I think actually now you do. I think we've reached a real time for it, where this is what people want to see. People are bored of like the very generic heroes and heroines of the past. and are now looking for things that represent a wider diversity of young people, just because that is what the landscape is for young people now, and they are looking for things that have more interesting protagonists. So the very first thing we pitched is, let's try and do something that has that sort of wealth of variety that we want to see in novels, but we'll see it in short story form. And we got some absolutely terrific things back.
We did, we absolutely did. I mean, the first, as you say, that first anthology was very broad in terms of seeing diverse voices coming back. But I think coming into Teens of Tomorrow, when we were able to run the second contest, which of course we extended during the pandemic because, you know, life was paced very differently and people were dealing with various difficulties. So it took longer to gather our entries for the second anthology than the first. But I think, despite the fact that Teens was then pitched as futuristic stories, because of the audience that we had garnered from Odd Voices, the writers that came to us were already beautifully diverse in their voices and authentic in their cultural, social, gender representations. You know, everything that came to the table with Teens was what we'd hoped for with Odd Voices and more, I think, for sure. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey, and it's certainly been nice to have all this wonderful literature coming in to focus on, especially during the pandemic, because we did our entire judging period during all the worldwide lockdown.
Yeah, it was a very strange thing where we sat down. I think it was early February. We sat down to properly settle on what the theme for the next competition was going to be. And I remember sitting in the pub and we were talking about two things. We wanted one, we really wanted stuff that was on future focused issues, and I think at the time we were mainly thinking about things like climate change, which was the big hot button issue at that point, which was because it was at the time of the Australian bushfires, and all that was going on. And there were, at this stage, there were already rumblings of the pandemic going on, but it was still at that stage where we just didn't have any concept of how huge and how much it was going to take over everyone's lives. And so it was weird to sort of launch this future focused, and also we wanted something with quite a political bent. I think we established something that had that kind of motivation, but it was very strange to sort of have set that premise and then feel very much like we are living through a period of history of like seismic change, and not only with COVID, but things like Black Lives Matter coming into the forefront, and
Yes.
you know, different kinds of protest movements. I mean, only a few years before, there's things like March for Our Lives and Fridays for Future, and all these things seem to be happening at the same time, and there seems to be a push for you know, a bit more progressivism in terms of you know, people's cultural identity and equality, and all that stuff, but at the same time dealing with stuff that, you know, beforehand has been the subject of, you know, science fiction films.
Yes.
You know, these sort of you know, environmental collapse and pandemics. So it did feel like, oh, we're not only writing at the future, we're now sort of living in the future. This sort of you know, sort of what we previously kind of, you know, envisioned as being very dystopian conditions, we're now getting a taste of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're living it a few generations earlier than we might have anticipated, certainly. Which, of course, has inspired a bevy of wonderful fiction. There's a few that I think of particularly tonight that the authors that we're talking to that are going to be sort of majorly pandemic related and pandemic focused, which is interesting to read about, but also very near the knuckle of what we're all experiencing. So it's sort of cathartic, but very apt at the same time, which I think is yeah, one of the things that I really enjoyed about putting the anthology together is that there are stories that take you away from the now, but still bring you back into the pertinent issues of what's happening right now and what is about to happen in the very near future. Particularly for the next generations going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was the book we were really wanting to sort of harness what is the feeling of younger people, and we do actually have quite a lot of writers who are in the age bracket they're also writing for.
Mm.
So that's going to be great to talk to some of them, as you alluded to there.
Yes, plenty of writers still fitting the YA category, which has been wonderful to see. I wanted to ask you, whilst we've got this a little moment before we welcome Tonya for our first proper interview of the evening, a little bit about your story, because you and I have added and written especially for the anthology 2 bonus stories to the end after our top 10, our prize winners, which we've tried to keep on theme. Now, yours is True America. And I wondered if you could give us a little sort of précis and introduction to that and some of the ideas behind why you crafted it.
Yeah, so as we've alluded to, we were looking for put together an anthology that really featured a lot of these issues that were coming up politically, globally, that were really had a lot of people talking and had a lot of strong opinions about those things. And I actually wrote my story after we'd already got our selection from the anthology and we'd already started picking our finalists, because I felt like whatever I added as bonus material, I really wanted to sort of maybe tick a box that hadn't been ticked yet. But it's also something I wanted to write about myself. So at the time I was writing it, it was actually going up to the 2020 election. Which is always a period where you kind of become very aware, if you're paying attention what's going on in America, that there's a really strong sense of two Americas, and that there is a huge division in that country. I mean, there is, to be honest, there is in our country as well, because whatever happens in England tends to be a bit of an echo of what's happening in America politically. But there was this real schism between right and left. And one of the issues majorly at the heart of right and left in America is guns, and whether you're pro-gun or gun control. And it's something I feel very strongly about, and I'll make no secret of the fact that I'm on the gun control side. And at the same time, actually, not long before I started writing this story, I actually went paintballing for the first time. And it's one of those things where if you have that sort of fake environment, even that fake environment of guns, where you've still got guns that hurt a bit when you're hit by something, and they still make a loud noise, and it's still like me and my friend Rob on the day, we were actually a little freaked out by it all. Even in that sort of what is meant to be a sort of fun, violent, it's something that you can find quite unnerving. If you do sort of, if you can't quite, I think it's if you can't quite switch your brain off to the reality of guns, the reality of, what it would be like to be in that scenario where you're getting shot at, which is not something as an English person you really prepare for. Exactly. I imagine if you're an American teenager, you really have to. So I was doing a bit of research into that, and I was really doing research into school shooter drills in America. And again, that's something to me that sounds like a really scary dystopian idea, the idea that you're going to go to school and do a drill where you are getting shot at all day. And it's like, or there's guns going off around you. And I know that a lot of schools will have things like SWAT teams that come in and do them, and they try and make them really realistic as possible. And they'll have people who lie down and pretend bodies in the corridor and things like that. And for me, as someone who doesn't, thankfully, never has had to go through that as part of school, that was something I found absolutely horrendous. So the concept and the story itself revolves around school shooter drill, and the main character is a character who is very anti-gun, but he lives in a part of America which is hugely pro-gun. So it's being that sort of outsider and that sort of that minority voice, and feeling like, particularly as a young man, that this is supposed to be something that you get behind and everything. So it's really about the sort of trauma of this school shooter drill. It's also, I said it's slightly in the future, and I said it the reason it's called True America is because there was actually a lot of talk and a lot of articles I was reading around the time of the 2020 election, where there were actual, there's quite a lot of fierce debate about whether at some point America could become two countries, because things like blue states and red states have been so ingrained for so long,
Yeah, the
and the two
extremity
don't
of the
agree very
divisions.
well.
Yeah.
And the two don't agree very well. There was a lot of talk about, will those two divide at some point? There's not that many swing states. A lot of states are like rooted in whatever their traditional politics are. So part of the setting for this one was to actually say, okay, well, this is what if that happened? What if they did actually split? Because you can imagine that if you then had like all the red states governed in one way and all the blue states governed in one way, then the politics are going to become even further apart. So it was the idea of like taking a teenage protagonist who is very liberal and very pro-gun control, then being in a state where guns are sort of even more sort of there's even more obsession over guns, and there's even more like even more availability of guns than there would be as there is now, where at least sort of the sort of tension between right and left keeps things in sort of balance, because at least for the last few years, it hasn't been one or the other in power for a very long time. It seems to be switching between the two.
Yeah, no, it's a terribly interesting sort of dichotomy, as you say, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about, not just about the Teens of Tomorrow anthology, because I think it certainly happened in the more future focused stories in Odd Voices as well, was taking examples of something that we see as a tension now and then pushing that to the extreme to show how much further that division could split as a kind of cautionary tale. And I really feel that in True America, in your story, that there's this horrible dividing line that's been set, but people are people, and they're not all automatically going to fall into the right category based on where they're born, because people are influenced by different things. They have their beliefs, and that's certainly going to going to trap them to some effect in a culture that they may not feel they belong to. And I think you captured that really well in your story.
Brilliant. It was also slightly influenced by, there's this great documentary called Boy State, which is about there's something they do in this convention they hold in Texas. I think actually they held them all over the place, but the documentary focused on the Texas one, which is, as you might imagine, very right-leaning. And the main sort of focus in that documentary is, again, a boy with very liberal politics, who the idea is that the people at this convention, you can run for governor, and it's the idea of running politically in a small controlled convention way, and they try and build their own society over the course of this convention. And there's got this young liberal boy who at the start is doing very well because he's an amazing speaker, and then it becomes this scandal in the convention that he's outed as having been to a March for Our Lives rally. And that suddenly becomes a big bone of contention of like, oh, you've got no chance now, after he's like already sort of won over a lot of people. And he kind of keeps going with it. It's like, can I actually change hearts and mind when I'm very much in the minority on this one opinion?
Yeah.
That was one of the big inspirations for it, and it's a great documentary. Speaking of looking at sort of slightly, contemporary issues exaggerated in future setting, are you going to have a quick chat about Reach Out and Touch Face, which is your story in this anthology?
Yeah, so what was it that I know you had a few questions that you were interested in.
Yeah, I think I was talking about, again, I think we were looking at, both of us, when we were writing our own stories for this, we were looking to touch upon themes that maybe hadn't been covered by our other stories. And for you, it was religion, particularly, but I think also an element of hierarchies around religious institutions and individuals even.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it was very much, there's sort of a class and control element to my story, which is sort of it's an interesting area for me, because it's something I've wanted to do for a long time that I've only very briefly touched on in dribs and drabs over God knows how many years that I've been doing this now, to do cyberpunk and to do techno thriller. So obviously the idea of it being future focused was already there, and it was already something that I was looking at exploring when we'd launched the competition. So I had a vague idea that I was going to do some kind of cyberpunk thriller. The religion aspect came from this is going to be very embarrassing to anybody who knows the program. I was watching a Netflix documentary about the famous Latin American astrologer Walter Mercado, who captivated the nation in much the way that a televangelist might, but with astrology and with horoscopes, and particularly in the Latin American and the Spanish speaking community in the United States, that Walter Mercado became this sort of regular figure that you would see every day for guidance. So that was certainly where one of the main characters, Gideon, who is the what I like to call the textrologist in my futuristic story, came from. And of course, because it's me, it took a turn into darkness almost immediately from this very wholesome idea of people just enjoying astrology from a very charismatic figure. I was like, how could this possibly go wrong? How could this be used for ill? And that's where, that's where the germ of reach out and touch faith comes from, certainly.
Could you talk a little bit more about Gideon? Because I was, when I first read the story, I was really interested in his origin stories. That he's a character who has a disability through an accident, which he himself predicted, and he's built this sort of this cult of people who are now believers in him having sort of in some ways psychic powers.
Yes, so it's interesting because he's not actually the main character of the story, but he is certainly the guiding action of it, and his moments in it are arguably more impactful, I guess, for the things that he does than what the people that he does them to. So the main character is actually Isla, who is a girl who finds herself in a sticky situation, shall we say, that becomes immediately apparent when you start reading the story. But yeah, Gideon is like a news mogul character. He's a young man who predicts something very terrible just before it happens. And in the world of technology, the fact that he happens to be broadcasting his life on his phone, as many young people do, at the exact moment that his prediction comes true, sends him into this viral explosion of people believing in a messiah-like figure. And Gideon takes full advantage of that. He sees an opportunity to reclaim things in his life that have been taken away from him, and certainly to to carve himself a very unique niche in the world, which inevitably leads him into some very dangerous abilities. Because I'm always very fascinated by power. I like the power corrupts trope. So doing it in this very technological, future-focused, religious but not religious kind of anachronism for modern life, and for this idea that technology has almost replaced religion in modern life, and to take that to its furthest, darkest extreme. So yeah, it's at the end of the book for a reason, because it's not particularly uplifting. Spoiler alert. I can see people commenting that I do not do wholesome in the chat, and you are absolutely correct. Those of you who've read my stuff before, I do not write wholesome work, whether it's for young adults or not. I write cautionary tales.